And we're live to the world. Thank you. I have a really special guest today, and we connected a very short while ago, but I really was intrigued by his profile. The guy's name is Chris Brindley, and the reason why I connected to him, the MBE obviously shone out to me as a beacon, and it connected to me. But he's had a really eclectic career from successful executive director in 2 different industries. He's an MB of Challenger Bank, Metro Bank, portfolio of NED, international speaker, executive coach, and consultant, and huge amounts more. But Chris, thank you again for coming on to my Mindful Leadership program. And again, I'd really like to find out a little bit more about you today, and just to cast yourself back to how you became Chris Brindley, and how you got the accolades along the way. If you'd like to give a little bit more of an introduction than I have.
Yeah, Jason, thank you, and just thank you for the invite. Delighted to connect. Delighted to share the stage with you today, and thank you for having me. So, yeah, I go right back to the start if I can, because I think that absolutely defines who I am and what I believe in. And my father walked out on me, my brother, and my mother when I was 3 months old. We lived in a council flat in a pretty tough part of Manchester, and you know, we didn't have any money. It was as simple as that when your father walks out on you. Mm-hmm. Whilst there was a stepfather in my life, it wasn't a particularly pleasurable experience. So ultimately, it was a tough upbringing with little or no money, clothed out of jumble sales. But actually, what my mum gave me was the most amazing unconditional love, and she taught me some amazing values from a really, really early start. And as an example, I used to run everywhere as a kid. And Mum would always say, if I was going to the shops for her, she wanted me to knock on her words, the old ladies' doors, because by the time you could get to the shops and come back, they'd still only be getting the coat on. So I'd always go on and knock on Mrs. Fanning's door, Mrs. Law's door, Mrs. Howe's door, and literally do their shopping. And I think from that very early stage, my mum instilled 2 things in me, which was 1, a work ethic, and 2 was to help others. And therefore that's been my guiding set of principles, really, which is helping others. And as I got later on in life, I created a mission statement for myself, which was to consistently deliver outstanding results and develop winners in life. And that's why I love what you do, because I think we share the same thing, which is helping others. And I just want to, if I can develop winners, and winning's a personal definition, so is success, and it means different things to different people. And therefore, I just want to help others. And I have 3 pictures underneath that statement. 1 is crossing the line first. I like to set new highs and standards, because I think others look to that to follow. Mm-hmm. The next one is 3 arrows in a bullseye, because I believe in excellence, and I think in excellence in everything we do. Then the last one is the most important picture, which is somebody at the top of a mountain helping somebody up the mountain, because my job, as I say, is just to help others. And you know, when people like yourself reach out, I just love to want to help. So ultimately, I wasn't talented. My GCSEs and A-level results were shocking, but I think I learned early doors emotional intelligence. It clearly wasn't called that then. Dan Goleman coined that phrase, as we know. But actually, sport played a big part in my life, because when I crossed the line, and whether that was playing football, cricket, whether I was doing athletics, actually any shit that was going on at home just wasn't, it wasn't in my head. It was a great teacher called Ray Woods, primary school teacher, great secondary school headmaster called Colin Crofts, actually believed in me as a human being and didn't look at my academic results. Mm-hmm. And therefore I learned some amazing values through sport, which was team building, communication, problem solving, how to prepare, how to win properly, how to lose properly. I remember those lessons well. And actually, early doors, I broke my leg quite badly, so that meant I couldn't play contact sport. But I did my coaching badges before I broke my leg, which I think was serendipity. It was meant to happen. And as a result of learning how to coach in sport to a high level, I went into the workplace and realised that no coaching happened. There was lots of barking of orders, lots of shouting and screaming and being told what to do. And I'd suffered that at home with a pretty horrible stepfather. So I actually realised that didn't get the best out of people. So I think, we spoke offline earlier about NLP and communication. Yep. Actually caring about others and realising that everyone's a human being with different stuff going on in their lives. And actually, I prefer to give somebody a good listening to than I'd ever prefer to give somebody a good talking to. So I think that's what made me. I went and coached my teams, and funnily enough, I got some pretty cool results. As a result of that, the bosses went, give him that next job and see if he's any good. And I might not be, but if I coach others to be good, then funnily enough, the team does well. And it's always about what can we achieve as a team. So ultimately, I think being a leader is a privilege, being a head coach is a privilege. And actually getting the very, very best out of others, funnily enough, creates high-performing teams. And ultimately, that's taken me through some different industries. And even now in my non-exec portfolio, it's just about finding out what others want to achieve and helping them get there. So let's set the goal, let's set the outcome. Let's come back to where we are and let's then understand that we can all work together to achieve some great outcomes, both personally and professionally. So that's my background in a nutshell, Jason.
Wow. That's really cool. I love how you've used the sports analogy for coaching. And I read a book quite recently, Bill Hart, which is the $1 Billion Coach. And he comes from a similar sort of background and how he's used his professional sporting career to go into business. And it works because there's a transition and a natural transition. It's about working as a team, working together, but also listening to others. And that's a powerful resource to actually have. And there's massive accolade to have as a young kid. Because I remember when I was in athletics as a kid and running for Essex and all of that, that really sort of builds you from a young age. That's why it resonated with me from what you just said. So where do you think you are going now? Where's your journey now from where you've been?
It's more to help others than ever before. Because we had no money and we lived in a council house as a kid. And when I met my wife, we've been married almost 34 years now. It was about providing security. Got two beautiful and wonderful children that are the absolute pride of my life. And early doors, it was about security, both for Elaine and I, and then for my family. But I always promised myself, I always remember the day before I started work, I went to a pub with my mate, and we stood on the corner at 10:30 at night. It was a Sunday night. We were starting work on the Monday. And he just said, where does it all end? We were 18 and we were on a street corner before we started work. And I said, I'll tell you what, I said, by the time I'm 50, I promise I won't be working for anybody full time. Sadly, I failed, Jason. I was 50 years and 1 month when I created the portfolio. But it was about absolutely being clear that I would create a level of security for my family. My motivations would not be about reward. From a monetary point of view, my reward would be about having a portfolio of roles that I could help others. And I'm proud to some of the logos you've got there. Switch the Play is a charity. I do that free of charge, and if I do any presentations, then I donate 20% of my fee to the charity. Wow. And it's about helping professional sports people transition out of the sports world into the business world. And I think you said earlier what resonated with you is the fact that you've got great skills that you can learn from sport. If you speak to an elite athlete, they've never been late for training. They know how to problem solve. They are great team players. They set goals. What's lacking in the business world is knowledge. And often they think they can't get that knowledge. But guess what? They've got so many personal attributes and qualities. So part of Switch the Play, Manchester FA is up there as well. I played football for Manchester FA as an 18-year-old.
Wow. Okay.
And when I got asked would I become the first ever non-exec director in grassroots football for Manchester FA, I jumped at the chance because they gave me chance 30 odd years earlier. So to go in there and help people do grassroots. So you know, the reason I got my MBA was because of all the charitable work I do in sport, and it is an absolute privilege. But it wasn't for the gong. It was all about helping others be better at who they are and what they do. And I was asked to go back to my school in 2012 Olympic year.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I'll go back on one condition. You don't tell anybody I went to the school. That's my job. I did a presentation, and I remember one pupil stood up and said, it's easy for you. You didn't grow up around here. And I said, well, what? Just let me finish the presentation. If you still feel that way at the end, let's have the conversation. And I talked about some of my achievements, but then I showed them a picture of me, black and white picture, by the way, of me and the football team. I showed them a picture of me at sports day, and some people went, isn't that Longford Park? Then I showed them the street where I grew up, and they went, that looks like Emery Avenue, and it was. And then I showed them my GCSE results from my name, Tipp-Ex out, and they went, who's that? What are those results? They're not very good. And I turned around and said, because I came to the school. And the presentation was entitled Dreams Are Free.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get across to the pupils at Charlton High School that irrespective of your home situation, irrespective of your GCSE results, quite frankly, don't let anybody put you in a box or put you in a position where they crush your dreams at such a young age.
Yeah.
Because actually, life's wonderful, and you can sit and program, and as we do, you know, using one of your future guests, Jack Black, sit there and go, I am going to create the future that I want, not that a teacher tells me I'm going to have or a stepfather I'm going to have. I go back to my mum. She encouraged me to talk about Dreams Are Free. You know, on my 40th birthday, she sent me a beautiful card, and I've got it here with me now all the time. And it says, "Believe in yourself and remember anything is possible."
Wow,
and
that's really cool.
It is, and I said earlier, you know, part of what motivates me now is to continue the great work Mum did by instilling some of those values and behaviours in me. So that's what I do now.
Talk about the three. You had three things that are going on. I looked at your profile. And I looked at a lot of the other stuff. You got warm up, peak performance, and warm down, and the fourth one is never have back-to-back meetings or something like that. But talk to me about that, because that's quite intriguing.
So one of the things when I went through my coaching badges is how athletes get to peak performance. And in the simplest format, athletes warm up.
Yep.
So I started to look at that and go, well, what's the business equivalent of warm up? And I see people in meetings running late. They've not read the papers. They've not thought of the questions they could be asking. They haven't thought of the objectives. They don't understand the people in the room. And actually, those meetings can be quite chaotic. So when I started to lead teams, I started to talk about what the standards I expected of a high-performing team in terms of warming up. You know, people would leave a meeting, I've seen them, and moan about the meeting. And the job is to survive it. And I then go, well, how can you moan about the outcome if you've not contributed in the meeting? You know, and I don't like people that go through a slide deck in a meeting. It's 48 slides. I learned to read at the age of 5. If you send me the slide deck in advance, I can ask other people, I can reflect, I can create some good questions and then look at alternative suggestions to the outcome. And actually, there's a richness and diversity in thinking. So I talk a lot about warming up when it comes to meetings. And in sport, Clive Woodward talks about Lombardi time, named after Vince Lombardi, the great coach from the Green Bay Packers, which says basically, if the meeting starts at 10, it starts at 10 to 10, and I'll lock the door if you're not in at 10 to. Because actually, I want us to be starting at 10. Not getting your coffee, not talking about Love Island, not forgetting your pen or your paper and all that nonsense. So warm-up's really important, and great athletes warm up so they don't get injured when it comes to peak performance. Peak performance is about actually understanding what your roles and responsibilities are during that moment, that meeting. Warm down, athletes warm down so they can recover quicker to get peak performance for the next time they have to perform. Because elite athletes don't perform at a high level once. They consistently perform at a high level. And I want that from our teams. And actually that warm down is often doing your action points that others have to help you with during that warm down period. Because what I saw when I joined NatWest, for example, was a lot of people had back-to-back meetings. There'd be typically 3 or 4 action points per meeting. There'd have 5 meetings a day. And actually they started logging on and sending 20 action points at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And what that then created was a dependency culture. People would then start logging on at 8, 9, 10 at night. Yeah. And then basically they'd have no home life. So when I went to NatWest and observed that, the first thing I did was to ban emails between 6 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock in the morning. Just said it's not happening. If you want to create them in drafts, I can't stop you doing that. But you are not impacting everybody else's home life because you don't have a good warm down process. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you can get those action points during the warm down process, people then can start working on them even quicker. So you get better outcomes. Yeah. And then the last point is QRT. And QRT stands for quality recovery time, which is just go out and get some fresh air, go to the toilet, just let the last meeting go, clear your head, and then start the warm-up process for any future meetings. And it's the same with appraisals. I've had bosses that have literally run in and said, I'm sorry, Chris, I've not had a chance to read your paperwork. Do you want to talk me through it? And these were appraisals. I'd spent hours preparing and they couldn't even be asked reading the paperwork beforehand. That was never going to be a good appraisal.
So it's a matter of disrespect.
Disrespectful to me, and they expect me to then to perform out my skin for them. It's incongruent. So all meetings I follow: warm up, peak performance, warm down, quality recovery time.
Love that. Absolutely love that. And it really distills it quite down to a simple process that people can understand. Because again, it's a matter of trusting people to do what they need to be doing within a meeting and before a meeting. And while they're in the meeting, that they get to the issues, the challenges, or whatever it is that they need to do in a clear, precise way, and hopefully not get PowerPointed out of the market, because no one really wants that. And that's probably the worst for the brain. And you're right, is after the meeting, go out, get some fresh air, because you need to cleanse the head, go out into some green spaces, or meditate, or go for a run, or whatever it might be. So what do you think the challenges that people are facing right now in terms of business and maybe sports? I know we've gone through a bit of a mad phase, but what do you think is where do you think the challenges are now?
I think mindfulness, mental well-being is a big challenge, and genuinely, when I was at school, I was given lots of facts. And one thing sport gave me was problem-solving techniques. And then as I've gone through later life, I talk about solutions, not problems. Mm-hmm. And I talk about prevention, not cure. And I just don't think through the education process or through the work process, we genuinely help people. I call it agile or critical thinking, and the power of the brain. And what you focus on grows. What you ignore withers away and dies. That's what a belief that I have, and a lot of people focus on the negatives. Yeah, and therefore, what you focus on grows. Actually, what then starts to happen is you actually have a limited belief system that everything's bad, and what I think organisations and great leaders should be doing is helping people think through. This isn't our first ever crisis, Jason. I think it's probably my 5th. Of course, it's the first pandemic, but basically, it's just a change in the world order. Mm-hmm. And all states are temporary. If it's going well, don't just think that's for life. It's temporary. Mm-hmm. You still need to keep working at it, just like a good athlete would work on their technique and learn new ways of being better, whether that's marginal gains. So I try and help people think with tools and techniques for the long term. There's a great phrase: if you give a boy a fish, he feeds for a day. If you teach a boy to fish, he feeds for life. And I like to help people through their thinking rather than give them the answer. Because if I give everybody the answer, all they'll ever do is need one phone number in life, and that'll be mine. If I help people think things through and actually have some tools and techniques, so if it was goal setting, I'd use GROW. goal, reality, options, and will. Situational leadership about knowledge, skill, confidence, and motivation. Actually, people can then look at those models and go, at least I know where to start thinking. So I genuinely would ask people to just consider how powerful the brain can be, but actually how limiting the brain can be, and for the tools and techniques to get the very, very best out of your brain. I mean, a bit like a computer, garbage in, garbage out. So, you know, I read a lot of books, listen to podcasts like this about how can I be better at who I am and what I do. But quite frankly, if you ask me what happened on Coronation Street or Hollyoaks or whatever crap TV, I can't tell you, because I get people might want to watch that to relax, but I don't think you need 4 hours of it a night, 7 days a week. When actually learning about some of the other bits of mindfulness and meditation, sort of using the brain between the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, I just think I wish people could watch less television and do a bit more thinking.
Absolutely. I totally concur with absolutely everything that you've just said. And I use the same analogy, actually, is whatever you program, whatever you program into a computer, it displays on the screen like this, supercomputer. And it's the same with the mind. Whatever you program into your mind is the outcome. So if it's negative thoughts, then the whole day is going to be negative. If you program the right sort of language and the language patterns into it, it has a positive outcome to it, then your brain will find the answers, and it will find either the positive or the negative, depending on what you've actually said to yourself. So I find that absolutely fascinating, and I wouldn't say I try to do that. I do that on a daily basis, even if I've had negative forces in my head, because we are feeling types of beings, and sometimes negativity does enter the mind, but it's actually capturing those moments. How do you do that to yourself?
Oh, look, you've got a guest coming on a huge podcast called Jack Black, and for me, Mindstore played a huge part in my life. So actually, it's interesting. Some of the tools and techniques that I learned from Jack Black was language. I listen to people's language, and I have to stop them and say, can you start using different language? Because actually that language will program your brain. So I hear phrases in coaching, for example, I'm going to give somebody constructive criticism. And I just turn around and say, which word do you think the person will hear? And fully enough, it rarely is constructive. They'll hear it as criticism. Whereas I talk about feedback. If it's going well, I'll give you some feedback. If I'd like to do it differently, I'll give you some feedback. I hear people say, how are you? And they go, not bad, thanks. What? So that's what the brain program's bad. Before my mum passed away, she'd say things like, oh, you know, winter's coming, I'm going to get the flu. I said, of course you are going to get the flu.
You are.
How do you know? Because you've just told yourself you're going to get it, right? So talk about wellness, not illness. You know, talk about what you want to happen, not what you don't want to happen, because the brain doesn't distinguish and say, you know, you don't want it to happen. No, focus it. I hear parents say to children, don't go near the road. So what does the brain program? The road. If you want your child to stay in the garden, tell them to stay in the garden. And if your child is ever carrying milk, please never say, don't spill the milk. You weren't thinking of it until you mentioned it. Then you start thinking of it, then your hand shakes, then you spill it, then there's consequences. Funny enough, you never want to drink milk again. So
don't think of a pink elephant.
Talk about positive, don't talk about what you don't want, because your brain will program what you don't want. And then you get into that downward spiral. So I talk a lot about program thoughts, talk about what you want to happen, not what you don't want. And actually, people, please check your language all the time. People say, I'm just this. You're not just anything. You are you. You're a unique human being. You've got lots and lots of talents. Don't compare yourself against others. Just be a better you. And funnily enough, focus on personal best strategy of doing something different better every single day, no matter how small. And then write it down, because that's a sense of achievement and accomplishment. And actually, that's what builds self-esteem and self-confidence.
I agree. I totally concur with you on all of that. The question that I'm going to ask, but I probably know the answer because you might have already said it, but I watched a documentary the other day, and it was to do with some of the top bands in the world. They went to a place out in Wales. I think it was Led Zeppelin went to this farm and they created the best album that they ever did. And Queen went there and they created Bohemian Rhapsody. And then Oasis went there in the 90s, and then all of the other went there. But they wouldn't have gone there if they hadn't had the time and the space to create something wonderful. And they all created something wonderful out of that. So based on that, what is your creative space and how do you utilize it and how do you use it?
Well, there's a couple of things, Jason. You're absolutely right. So number one, my tip to everybody is you should have one appointment every week with yourself for a minimum of 2 hours. And that is the most important appointment. Don't cancel it for anything. It's about time for you to think and reflect and look into the future. Don't do it at work. Don't do it at home because you have distractions. Do it somewhere where nobody knows you are. And I walk by a river or I walk by a canal. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think there'll be lots of people listening to this podcast where actually they get some great ideas where they're in the shower in the morning, or they are going for a walk, or they're daydreaming in the sun. Because actually, that's how your right brain works. Your right brain is the creative side. Mm-hmm. And actually, as you move away from beta waves into alpha and theta waves, that is what connects your right creative brain. So I actually go for walks. I will just sit and relax in a place where nobody can disrupt me. And actually, I get some fantastic ideas. There's a place in North Wales that I love called Llandudno. And it's got a great home, it's got a little home, it's got the most amazing promenade, it's got 2 beaches, and I'll actually just drive there. It's an hour, 20 minutes from home, just to be with myself. And actually, that's how I come up with lots of different strategies. I do my programming there. I look at what I want to be in my 60th year, my 70th year, my 80th year, and actually I sit and write those goals down. So I reckon everybody should have an appointment with themselves with no distractions, and actually start to think about what you want the future life to look like. Start writing those goals down, then start working towards them.
That is absolutely super cool. And I do that as well. I'm quite close to the Dublin mountains here, so I go off for walks. I have my headphones in, I listen to a podcast, get into the moment, and I like to sit and gaze at the view and just imagine stuff. And I just come up with ideas then. Another podcast that I did with a guy called Ted Rubin, he said he goes to the beach. Yeah. And then what he does, he posts out on Twitter and then he tests it. And then he said, oh, that's a great idea. So it's a wonderful time that we all need to do. And I totally believe that it's empowering, but it's a creative zone, but it's also a calming zone as well. And I like green spaces. Yeah. I also like to be near water as well, depending on my mood. So the last question, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
Gosh, I haven't got one. I know that. I would love to give everybody access to that whole bit about how powerful the brain could be.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of people. You know, I learn from others. You know, obsession about walking with AirPods in, listening to podcasts and looking at webinars. If I read books, it's about people that have made a difference to the world. And if I had a superpower, it'd probably be, you know, be able to sprinkle a little bit of that dust on everybody, which is to understand how you could think and program your life to be better, and actually have empowering beliefs rather than limited beliefs. People say they can't, and sad thing is they get to a part of their life where they might not be able to change things physically or mentally, and they come up with those phrases, I would have, should have, could have. And the point is, we've all got many years left. Why don't we use those years to the best of our ability? But it does start with what you think, and what you think you start to then verbalize, and then you verbalize, and then you behave, and others respond. So just choose to be the very, very best you can be. And if I could have a superpower, it would be to go in and tinker with people's brains, to open the valve and let them realize what a wonderful life we can have, and we just have to choose to think it.
That's wonderful, and it's serving others and it's helping others to be empower them to be better selves or better themselves, and giving them a gift. I love that. That's really cool. So Chris, how can people find you?
LinkedIn. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook. LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to connect with people. More than happy for them to ask me questions, and I will get back to people. So if people want to know a little bit more, then LinkedIn's the place.
Excellent. That's really cool. And look, again, thank you so much for your time. It's very much appreciated for me, and it's also appreciated for everyone and anyone that's listening to this, because you've given some wonderful advice here. And if it empowers one person and it gives a gift to someone along the way that they can do something in their lives, I think that's a gift. That really is a gift. And thank you so much.
Jason, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. More than happy to share with others, but it's all part of networking and learning. So it's great for me as well, because I'm on a learning journey too. So thank you.